Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Simple Good Podcast. Simple steps to living a significant life, doing good, and pursuing your calling. I'm your host, Chris Marlowe. Our first series is 5 anchors to overcoming life's storms. We're so excited to bring special guests to talk about these key topics. My guest this week is my friend Tyler Reagin. Tyler is the former president of Catalyst, a leadership development organization that exists to unify and equip leaders who love the church through resources and experiential events. Today, Tyler serves as the founder of the Life Giving Company, a leadership consulting platform which trains and develops leaders to be life-giving and in turn build a high-impact and healthy organizations. Tyler also has an amazing podcast and a great book. You can check those out in the show notes. And so without further ado, welcome Tyler Reagin. Hey everyone, we're talking about week 4 of overcoming life storms with these really powerful anchors. And one of those anchors is courage. And Tyler is going to join us today, or is joining us today, to really talk about what it means to have courage in the midst of life storms. So Tyler, welcome to the Simple Good Podcast. We're so excited you're here, man.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. It's good to see you. You look very dapper today.
I'm looking. So here's the deal. So we're recording this on video, but this is my mask. You know, my little COVID-19
mask.
So
you're ready to go at any time.
Anytime, because I couldn't find a mask, and I was like, where am I going to get one of these things? I mean, I'm in downtown Raleigh, a medical community,
right?
And so basically, a good friend of mine is a pediatrician, and she gives me this mask that has a bunch of bear faces on it. So, which was funny because I was actually selling a car the other day, and I show up with a mask that has a bunch of
That's
bears
hilarious.
and teddy bears, and I'm like, I need to step up my game. So I ended up doing this. So man, I'm super excited you're here. Thank you so much for taking the time. You've been around some of the greatest leaders imaginable, right? Your time with Andy Stanley at North Point, your time leading Catalyst you've just literally have lived and breathed leadership. And one of the things I love about leadership is, to me, one of the essential qualities of a great leader is to have courage. And so when we hear the word courage, one of the things that I think we all struggle with is we have this mental image of a superhero, like a Wonder Woman or, Braveheart. But can you talk about the importance of courage and leadership, especially in the midst of life storms, why leading well with courage is so vital?
Yeah, and I would back up. A few years ago, we did a theme for Catalyst called Of Good Courage. And me and Jason Haynes, who always did content for us, we would have these months of just conversations around it. We'd wrestle, we'd have team meetings, brainstorming, all these things. But it always, for the 7 years I was there, we'd always have that moment where it just clicked. It was like, that's it. That's the thing. Uncommon fellowship. We felt like we bounced around unity. We were trying to, but Of Good Courage, I remembered growing up around the church, but I remembered learning Joshua 1:9 from King James, which says, be strong and of good courage. And so we started wrestling with that. Well, when we found that the Greek word for courage in the Old Testament, how there is I forget what they call it, but, and I went to seminary, Chris. There you go. See,
and I'm not helping you at all right now. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking.
The Greek Old Testament, where they, it's all written in Greek. The word for courage is tharse, T-H-A-R-S-E. And what was so stunning about that definition is what helps me understand courage. Because you're exactly right. I think most of us think courage is I got to pull up my bootstraps, I got to just dig in, and I got to go. But the actual definition of Greek word for courage is tharse, which is confidence infused by the Spirit. And what's beautiful about that is it shows us as believers, we've got it in us. It is not a go find it thing. It is literally in our DNA as believers. And I think that is the most comforting and encouraging and non-scary thing as leaders that need courage. Now, it does not take away fear. It does not take away all those elements that come with leading. But if we know that actually what God's saying to Joshua, what Joshua was being led with is, hey, I'm with you. Not only am I with you, but I'm in you. You have this in you because the Spirit is in you. I think that's one of the most beautiful pictures of courage. And it honestly, since that theme, we've gone through some really interesting seasons, and me and my leadership has been really hard in some parts. And a lot of it, I would pull back on that very thought that, you know what? I don't have answers. I am scared. But at the end of the day, I don't have to go looking for courage. I'm just going to walk in the truth that the Spirit is in me. And therefore, I have confidence because it is infused deep within me. So I think at the end of the day, and the reason we need courage as leaders is because we're going to be asked to do some things that are hard. You and I both know you've been leading for a long time. So many people, especially a lot of young leaders, like, oh, I want the position. I want the acknowledgement that comes with the title of CEO or this and that and the other. They don't have a clue about the weight that comes with it. Like, most of the team goes home and don't even think about work till the next morning. That's not what happens in leadership. Like, it's just not an option. You think about it all the time. It's just part of it. It is a 24-hour a day wait. You're thinking about this, that, and the other. Well, if you don't have courage to realize I'm going to be aggressive, I'm going to make some mistakes, but I'm going to lead courageously, and we're going to try this, and we're going to work on this, and we're going to move towards this, and we're going to do these things. It's going to be tough road. It's going to be tough sledding. There's just courage required to take steps, knowing some people aren't going to like it, and take steps knowing that this could not work, and we could all be looking for new jobs. And it takes courage to do these different things. It took courage for you to step in and go, I feel God stirring something for me. I'm gonna go after this thing called Help One Now.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I was just listening to Andy Stanley's leadership podcast, and Patrick Lencioni was on it, and he talks about this whole
two decent leadership thought, people.
Yeah, and those guys are ridiculous. I just whatever,
I would literally tell you this though, Chris. Those obviously I worked with Andy for a long 20 years of different things. Patrick's been with us, but their content has it's 90% of who I am as a leader. Like those two guys alone.
Yeah, and one of the things I love about what Patrick was sharing with his new book was like, there's so many people want a position because they want the reward-based leadership as opposed to the responsibility-based leadership. And I think what you're talking about is courage really means you're taking responsibility as opposed to wanting the reward. And so as you think about kind of living in the midst of life storms, what does it mean for a leader to have courage and take responsibility for kind of overcoming those storms? Because let's face it, right now, we're all facing massive frustrations and massive implications to like this year.
Right.
And like our dreams are literally on the line on many levels. And yet in order for us to overcome COVID and overcome whatever the economic disaster is going to be in the next year or two, how can we take responsibility, kind of connecting it back to Patrick, and have courage and lead really well in these moments? What are some practical things that you're thinking through to get through this next season of life?
Yeah, I think sometimes the most practical things are perspective. There are times that you're going to go through something that nobody else is going through. There are times that you're going to feel alone. What's crazy about this season is none of us are alone in this. Now, we feel alone because we're isolated in our houses and we're this and that and the other. But every single one of us is going through these unprecedented times. There's not a person immune to this. And so it is really a fascinating study of leadership right now. And so I think one of the most encouraging things is going, hey, it's not just me. Like,
definitely,
if you're feeling overwhelmed, if Chris is feeling overwhelmed, so is Tyler. If Tyler's feeling scared, so is Chris. It's like, we have the reality that, man, this is unprecedented. It really is. Like, in our time, it is. Well, hopefully we'll never experience something like this again. And maybe if we do, we'll have something to actually pull from.
Yeah, it's like a global shared experience right now.
It is. And that's kind of encouraging at times because it gives you the courage to realize, man, you don't know what you're doing right now, Chris. Like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Day by day.
I'm waking up every day and I'm going, I'm going to address what's in front of me. I'm going to do what I can control to help. Craig Rochelle recently talked about pretty openly on one of his messages about a few years ago having basically a breakdown, a nervous breakdown. And it came from the fact that he was trying to control everything he couldn't control. And there's a place of surrender. And you know what, Chris? I think one of the most courageous acts as a leader that we can do is surrender, is to let go. One of the most courageous things we can do is say, it's not about me and it's not about my feeling of control and that kind of thing. It's about him and trusting that he is in control. That's truly an act of faith. And so sometimes I think that it goes back to what you said earlier, but I think we have this idea of courage that's big and massive and huge, and it's got to be this. It's not, man. Last week I released my first podcast. That's a step of courage. Now it took work. It took to, you have courage because you're going, does anybody want to listen to that? Is it any good? I remember when I wrote my first book, one of the most real moments for me was when I handed the first chapter to my wife, to my assistant, and another person that worked on our team. I'd never done anything like that.
Scary,
And
right?
it
People
took
don't know how
courage.
scary that is, that moment.
Oh my gosh, but it took so much courage just to go, here you go. Like, can you give me some thoughts? It's like a painter revealing a painting for the first time. Leadership's that way day in and day out, man. I was just on a Zoom call for an hour with the team I'm leading down at a church in Orlando. And, they look at you sometimes and go, hey, so what should we do?
Yeah.
Well, the courage isn't going, well, we need to go big. The courage is going, I think we should try this. And I think where we lose courage is we don't feel trusted. We lose courage when people are constantly second guessing. But at the end of the day, courage is just sometimes a baby step towards the direction you want to take something.
Yeah, and I think it's fascinating too, because when we think about leadership and courage and how, those two elements are so interconnected. And right now, we know so many folks who are having to have courage in ways they never thought possible. I mean, teachers are now teaching from Zoom, and all of a sudden their whole entire philosophy of teaching is going from, in person to like caring for a kid to like online. And I'm seeing so many of my teacher friends. So we think of courage. It's not just, it's not the Wonder Woman. It's not, it's not all these amazing figures. It's like, it's everyday people like nurses and teachers and pastors who kind of are the heart and soul of our communities, but they're all leading differently. And if you're out there and you're one of those folks, life is confusing and life is hard right now, but you're literally leading an entire generation forward. And that's, to me, tremendous courage by everyday normal people.
Yeah. And I think that's what, if there's something we could do in this podcast, Chris, for leaders listening, is to pull out the fact that they are already courageous. And if almost every one of them was on here, we could say, hey, do you remember that time you did that? You didn't feel like that was anything, but we see that as outsiders going, man, that was a courageous decision. You remember that time you led your family a different direction than the rest of the neighborhood because you felt like that was important? That was a courageous move. And man, we applaud you for that. Man, leaders, that's what we need to hear. We need to see those actions and going, oh yeah, it's not the big thing. It's not always the thing. It's like, we decided as a family to do this, and man, it has changed my kids' lives forever. That was courageous.
Yep. I love that. So I love the quote that you have. As believers, we need to lead differently in our organizations because we represent who Jesus is. You certainly have a unique and valuable experience being the founder of the life-giving company. As what I call, you're a leader leading leaders. You've been that way, whether you're at North Point or at Catalyst or doing what you're doing now. First of all, how would you, in the most practical, tangible way, if you were sitting down with a 25-year-old leader and they said, Tyler, what does it mean to be an effective leader? How would you respond?
I would probably talk about a phrase that I've used for a long time, and it came out of that, like the Life Giving Leader book that I wrote. But when life flows, influence grows. I think so many young leaders want influence now. They want the opportunity. They want overnight success. And the way I've always tried to encourage leaders practically is, let's say, and every one of us, John Maxwell describes leadership as influence. Many people say that, but John's who I've always attributed it to. And every person I know, young, old, whatever, has influence with at least 1, 2, 3 other people. And so to me, leadership is gained by you stewarding those 2 people right now. Like whatever that small circle of influence you have, your job is to care for it. Your job is to take care of it. Your job is to steward in a way. The what I would add to John's definition of leadership, which is leadership is influence, is that how you steward your influence is your leadership journey.
I love that.
No matter if it's 2 or it's 2,000.
Can you say that again?
No matter if
say that again, because I think that's really important.
Yeah. So leadership is influence, and how you steward your influence is your leadership journey. That's what leadership is, because so many of us are going, I'm not a leader. I'm not leading. Yes, you are. If you have influence with one other person, and everybody does, then how you steward that bit of influence will dictate whether you get more. And so that's where the phrase, when life flows, influence grows. So if I've got 5 people on my team and I actually steward them well and I lead them well and I take care of them, you will be shocked at how quickly 10 people are sitting in that circle. not because of your pedigree, probably not because of your education, probably not because of this, that, and the other, all the other list of things that have always been highest priority, but because you cared for those people and you equipped them and you empowered them, and life flowed from you to them. You didn't take it from them. Every one of us have had bosses that took from us. And I'm telling you, as a young leader, if you start out with the understanding that the flow of life needs to go the right direction, then you will literally see your influence continue to grow and grow. And Chris, I remember, we even met probably pretty early on in my
Yeah.
leadership
Yep.
journey with Catalyst. I remember the first 2 years just being flabbergasted that I was sitting in that seat.
Yeah, sure.
That's not my background. It was not
Yeah.
because of this, that, and the other. I wasn't known as A-list speaker or anything like that. It's still not. It's fine with me. Like, whatever. But what I do know is that for my entire career, however many people were sitting in that circle, I busted my tail to make sure that they were equipped and empowered to be better leaders. That's all I knew. And it went from 2 to 20 to 2,000. All of a sudden, we're in rooms of 10,000 people. And you're exactly right. God has given me this unique wiring that I'm not intimidated by leaders. I love leading leaders. That's who I'm. It's just a deep fire within me because I get it, but also because I love them. And I feel like the impact that leaders can have when they are actually stewarding their influence and bringing life to the people around them. And so I know that's a long answer and I'm trying to be very practical with it, but I think so many leaders are looking at their competency, they're looking at all these other pieces. And I'm going, breathe for a second. Leadership's not as hard as you think it is. Take care of the people around you. That's how you lead well.
Yeah, and I love what you said to make it simple. If you just take care of the 2 or 3 that you're leading now, and then that expands, and then you have more impact and you have more opportunity. And so oftentimes we want to go from 3 to 300 to 3,000,
Totally.
as opposed to 3 to 6 to 9 to 18.
Yep.
And I think if we think smaller, we'll actually make a greater impact in the world. And I think, Tyler, the thing that frustrates me is if things aren't big or big platformed or famous, people don't feel like they're a significant leader. And if you're listening to this podcast, please understand the most significant leaders, we don't know who they are. We don't necessarily know their names or their organizations. They're everyday normal people doing really beautiful, hard work in the day-to-day aspects of society. And so be encouraged by that. So I want to ask you this next question because I think it's important. Obviously, we just talked about this, but you have years of experience coaching and curating these moments and spending time with other leaders and church executives. Leadership requires courage. What is a mistake you've often seen that other leaders have made when it comes to leading with courage? So, Tyler, what's a mistake you've seen that other leaders have made while they're leading with courage?
I think, and it comes back to what we even just talked about a little bit, Chris, you triggered something in my mind, is there are still leaders that will never understand that taking care of people is the highest priority. They will see the project, they will see the task, they will see the to-do list as the highest priority. And they will always put results over relationship, which, there are seasons that you got to do that. But I don't think there's ever a season that I would reverse that. To me, if there's a really hard result season that we've got, I'm leaning more into relationship even more than I had before, because I believe if I care for these people well, I'm going to get the best out of the results. Like that's always been my thought. And so I think one of the biggest mistakes is, where are you putting your courage? Is courage looking like acts of craziness of trying to just get the numbers right, no matter what the cost is courage going, yeah, but I laid off 8 people because we needed the numbers and the shareholders were on me, and this kind of like courage misplaced can be damaging. Courage misplaced is not leadership. It's foolishness. Like, so for me, and again, I'm very bent on this and I am very aware of that, but I fight super hard for healthy organizations. And I don't know a healthy organization that is result first, people way further down the list. What I've seen, this is what Lencioni's entire career has been built off, is that if you understand that if you're 2 companies selling the same exact product, but one has a healthy team and a healthy culture and the other doesn't, I don't care the cost. I don't care whatever. The one that's healthy is going to win in the long run. They might not win the number games in the short term, but they're going to win it in the long run. And so I think it's misplaced courage can be absolutely deadly to what you're trying to do.
Yeah, Tyler, I think we would both agree. We've seen some pretty phenomenal movements that became so results oriented, and they begin to lack the people caring aspect. And those movements have been destroyed. And so I think trying to mix in, I guess we need results, but we need people first, results second, because it's the people that will help maintain the results long term. And one of the things that help now that I'm completely passionate about, leading for 10, 12 years now, the org, is like, how do we build an organization that lasts beyond our lifetime? And so basically that's by making sure our people are taken care of. And I love that you mentioned that. Okay, last question before we get into some personal things that you're doing. You've been around leadership in a significant role. We've talked about it multiple times. And so here's one of the curiosity questions that I have. We live in such a content-driven world. Books, podcasts, seminars, live events, online events. You can listen about courage and leadership, but it's so... Have you had any frustration with people knowing in their head but not understanding in their heart what it means to really lead well? And if so, can you kind of dig into that? Because what I'm seeing is like people will know the language, but actually living a life of courage and leadership are two separate things.
Well, it's even worse. I mean, we've read books by people on leadership, and then when you get to know them, you go,
we need names, bro.
Did you write that? Like, you've never done that. You know what I mean? Like there's always an ideal. I think there's a reason that a lot of people don't talk about leadership or write about it, because you're writing about an ideal that you're always going to fail at. But if that's the case, why would we do anything, right? If I'm not going to start exercising because one day I'm going to not do it right, it doesn't work that way. And so for me, I've always just believed I'm going to try my best. At the end of the day, this is the person, this is the leadership that I want to be closest to, or I want to resemble. I want to do those kind of things. So you're right. There's a million things you can do. And just like our spiritual walks, so many of us have the knowledge in our heads, but it hasn't moved the 18 inches down to our hearts. And the men and women who lead from a place of conviction, from their truest self, that has moved from just knowledge about leadership to it's a DNA thing. It's who they are. It matters. I mean, what it reminds me of is emotional intelligence. When Daniel Goleman wrote the article in the 90s for Harvard Business Review, it was one of the first times there was data around that the best leaders in the world lead people best. And so, but the first two pieces of emotional intelligence are self-awareness and self-regulation. And I've led leaders for years who we've worked really hard to become self-aware. Hey, I'm a jerk when I talk to people. The problem is if they never translate from self-awareness to self-regulation. So in other words, Chris, if I'm a jerk when I talk to people, I catch it and I apologize. But after I've been a jerk, that an apology doesn't move hurt feelings. An apology doesn't. What our goal of self-awareness is to move to self-regulation, which is behavior change. It's not enough just to be self-aware that I'm a jerk when I talk to somebody. I have to do something about it before I talk to someone like a jerk. And the same thing goes for leadership. It's not enough to know the knowledge. It's not enough to read James Clear, Atomic Habits, and have all these great systems in place. It's not enough to read Patrick Lencioni's Death by Meeting and tell everybody that we're going to have better meetings. That's not enough. There has to be steps. And honestly, I think it's tied up all in this conversation of courage. It takes courage to go, you know what, guys, I'm vulnerable right now. I don't know what I'm doing in this moment, but we're going to figure this out together. Those sorts of things, when true leadership thought starts moving into your heart, you realize it's not just about you. I think that's at the end of the day, true leadership is such an outward focus. And what's required sometimes is if it's about you, then it's going to be head knowledge. But if you realize it's about other people, it will be heart knowledge. And I just think that's mission critical. And I think it is the mistakes we see with a lot of leaders. And I think it takes a lot of courage to focus your entire leadership journey on the people around you.
Yeah, I love it. Again, back to what Patrick was saying the other day in Annie's podcast, like there is no other understanding of leadership except that leadership is serving, period. And there's no, like, a leader is a servant, bottom line. And so in our title-based, everyone's so obsessed with having a certain title or a certain position. But man, when you put on the title president or CEO or teacher or nurse or doctor or pastor, like you're basically saying, I'm here to serve people.
Yep.
And that's takes courage to serve people, but that's
Yep.
also the best way to make an impact and do good in the world.
100%.
All right, man. Two things. Tell us a little bit about the book you wrote and about the company you're leading, because I think they're really important and vital, and I think they both go back to leadership and courage for sure.
Yeah, I released a leadership book a couple years ago called The Life-Giving Leader, and I got a new one coming out, Chris, next March. March of 2021. Right now, the title is, and I don't know if my publisher will shoot me for this or not, but it's done. So whatever.
Wait, is this a breaking news moment?
Is leading things you didn't start, winning big when you inherit people, places, and possibilities. So you starting Help One Now has a unique set of leadership skills. If I were to come onto your team, I have a different leadership skill set that I have to bring to the table because I didn't start that. I'm inheriting influence. I'm inheriting your hard work. So no matter if you're an entry level position that's stepping in, if you're stepping into a team that already exists, or you're taking over a platform from your dad, like there's a lot of churches that are transitioning from founder to the next person. That's a different leadership skill set. It's what I walked through at Catalyst of stepping into a very public thing behind somebody who did a great job with it. And so that's what the new book's on. I'm excited about that. But when I left Catalyst, I've always loved coaching leaders. It's always been very central to my passion. It's actually why Brad Lomenick brought me to Catalyst at the beginning, was to coach that team. And so I'm just kind of refocusing on that. So the Life-Giving Company is just built creating content, but also doing a lot of consulting with churches and organizations about healthy organizations and working with executive teams and doing some one-on-one coaching, and then just some consulting too around the creative space that I've been in for years. I do some event consulting. So it's a lot of fun, man. Just kind of like this afternoon, I'm going to take the boys and we're going to play golf. And who's going to tell me I can't, Chris?
It's a good life, right?
Because I own my own company.
It's the good life.
But I'm working like 15 hours a day right now. So I'm just trying to find those little windows. But
I love it. Well, it takes courage to lead your company, but also it takes courage to spend time with your kids, and trying to balance that part of life out is so critical. So, man, hey, thank you so much for coming on the Simple Good podcast, sharing your heart, helping us and guiding us to understanding what it means to live a life of courage and to lead really well. For those of you who want to connect with Tyler, all the information will be connected in the show notes. Thanks for coming on, man. We appreciate you and love what you're doing, and can't wait to connect in the future.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for wearing that North Carolina little buff. You got a buff.
It's a buff.
Strong.
It's a buff. Hey, I'm representing. I love North Carolina. That was some amazing information that Tyler talked about with leadership and courage. And if there's one thing I want to encourage you today, is that every single person listening to this, you are a leader and you have influence. And that requires a certain level of courage to lean into the influence that you have in order to make a difference in the world. The Simple Good podcast exists so we can hear from amazing voices doing significant work, and then we can take some of that wisdom, some of that knowledge, some of what they've learned out on the front lines and apply it to our everyday lives. And so hopefully you have been able to take some of that information and immediately apply it to your day-to-day life. And if we all do that, just imagine how much better the world can get. Favor. This podcast will succeed because you want to get behind it. And so if you want to send $1 million, you could do that. But if you can't do that, there are 3 things you can do. Ready? The first thing you could do is simply subscribe, then review, honest review, and then share. Subscribe, review, share. If you do that, that will help us spread the word, and more people can understand how they can have courage and make a difference in their life. Love you all. Thank you for listening to the Simple Good podcast.